You're listening to the Surgeons of Horror podcast. Hello and welcome to the Surgeons of Horror podcast. Its purpose is to dissect and discuss horror films, both old and new. I have the privilege now of sitting down and speaking with Craig Anderson, director of Red Christmas, and alongside him is Gary Doust, who is the director of the documentary that followed Craig on his journey, and that is called Horror Movie, A Low Budget Nightmare. Welcome, guys.
Hello, welcome aboard, guys.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. Sorry, we're good.
Good.
I'm good.
Welcome aboard. Thanks for taking some time out to have a chat with us. I guess before we kick off, before we kind of obviously talk about each of your respective films, did you guys know each other prior to Red Christmas being made, and maybe just kind of explain the relationship that you guys had coming into it?
Sure. Gary and I have known each other for ages. Australia's big short film festival, Tropfest, is one of the first places we met. As judges, like in the early 2000s. And Gary also ran a thing called Popcorn Taxi, which was a huge place for independent film. And
I remember that.
Yeah. Gary ran that and created it. And so I was just a fan of going to those things.
Yeah.
And that's when I first met Gary and we became friends. And
we sort of saw each other on the short film festival circuit as well. Craig had made a film called Life in a Datsun. And I'd made a documentary called Parking Patrol Officer 808, and I think we kept bumping into each other around that time as well. But I think it was we really got to know each other well when Craig was one of the actors that we followed in a documentary series I made called Next Up Hollywood. We spent 8 weeks, I think it was, in LA. Craig actually stayed in the same house that myself and the producer were staying in. And we got to hang out quite a bit, obviously making the show, but also afterwards, went to Disneyland things together.
Nice.
Yeah, we went hard on the weekends.
Just see you guys now on a flume ride, Well, that's hilarious.
There's a story about it.
So, look, Craig, I'll start with you, but it is in reference to Gary's film, Horror Movie, A Low Budget Nightmare. You seem pretty relaxed in front of the camera, and quite, I want to say, fairly open.
Yes.
And, my question was more about, is that a natural trait of yours to be that open, or were you conscious of how you were representing yourself for Gary's doco?
I am open enough. I've done a lot of comedy. Yeah. Comedy's where I've come from in my background. And I know that being open is a funny thing to do.
Sure.
Sure. I'm not saying that Gary's documentary is a comedy, but I do know that if you're going to fail, you might as well embrace it. And, if you're doing something that freaks you out, be honest about it, because that's just what I do, basically, is just, if it's going to hurt, why not share it? Why not make Gary have to sit through it as well?
Yeah. We'll skip the questions around your response to that. But
okay.
What was so both of you? This is a question for both of you. What was the most difficult challenge you both had to undertake as directors for both your respective films?
Gary, you go.
Yeah,
first,
I'll jump in.
Yeah,
I think for me, it's really just knowing where the story's going,
sure,
and when it's going to end. I mean, I knew it was a long haul following the making of this film. I didn't want to stop documenting Craig's journey when he finished making his film. I wanted to follow it through to sales and really see where it ended up.
Yeah.
So I think it was that. Maybe that was one of the harder things, just knowing when it was going to end. And I think in the beginning, trying to convince people like the ABC and Screen Australia to come on board and support the film through investment, because on the surface it could look like I'm making a DVD extra. I never, in my mind, was planning to make that, but I can see why some people held back and waited to see how things unfolded before they came on board.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point. It's something that my colleague, one of my fellow podcasters, actually raised about that, because it's interesting releasing both of those films at the same time, because people are used to seeing the documentary coming after the fact. So what was the choice behind that?
Well, actually, I didn't. Red Christmas was released a year before the documentary, so it sort of staggered in a way.
Yeah.
In that Craig's film premiered at Fantasia Fest, which is
Sure.
in the doco.
Yep.
So in a way, it's my films come out at the tail end of Red Christmas' journey in a way, which is interesting because in some ways it's brought some interest back to Red Christmas, possibly from a non-horror audience, but also we're finding that there's interest now to see both films.
Yeah, and hence why there's going to be a double screening at Events Cinema on the 1st of December.
Yeah.
I want to say it's 7 p.m. So that's Event Cinema, Georgetown in Sydney, yes?
Georgia, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Cool. So I should plug that, by the way, for anyone that may listen to this, if I do get this cut in time. Out the door.
That's right.
So back to you, Craig, with the same question. I mean, we see a lot of the challenges within Gary's film that you you had to face, but what do you think was the greatest challenge now we're like a year on, in hindsight, of your film?
By far the hardest part was the ending. Also, like Gary's, I made a lot of TV and comedy stuff, and I kind of know how to run a production. And even though I had no money and everything was cheap, I had a lot of awesome people help me out. But then when I got to the point where I now have a video file, that's the most horrifying part. And I don't think it's uncommon. I think that in the modern world, a lot of people can make a film, but the question is, should you, and what do you do once you've made it?
Yeah.
And that's what, it really broke my brain, that in the second half of Gary's doco, where I've made the movie, it's been at some festivals, it's okay, but now what? Like, so what? Why would anybody want to watch it? There are more than 1,000 horror films every year made, and there's only a space for, 10 in cinemas and maybe 100 on DVDs. Why would anyone care about your film? And it's very scary, and I didn't know that at the time. I just, as filmmakers, we get hear a lot of nonsense stories about, this film was just so good that the gods of Hollywood made it famous and made everybody watch it and give them an award. But that's not the common story. That happens to maybe 3 films a year. Whereas there are thousands of films a year that disappear, and some of them are good. And I had a lot of trouble, and maybe that's not even directing in a way. It's being a producer. I think Gary would probably agree that we're kind of good at that. But the producing is the worst job.
I would say that it's interesting because I documented all of this process with Craig, and in a way I'm sort of finding myself in the same situation now, trying to sell this film. I mean, I had a different funding path, which takes the pressure off a little bit in terms of... my film had support from TV, but I think as filmmakers, we all sort of have this belief after seeing the movie Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. But what I've realised, and I think Craig did too, it's not if you build it, they will come. It's if you build it and spend a shitload of money on marketing, they'll come. And that's a huge thing to come to terms with. And sort of depressing as well, because the film so good, but it's trying to get them out there. Which I think is the really hard thing, and it sucks for young filmmakers to have to go through that whole process and then just not have that support behind them. And at the same time, you see other films which do have that support that just sort of take off, and it's very frustrating. And it's evident when Craig goes through that in the film, unfortunately. But look, so my question is back to you again, Craig. Like with Red Christmas, it stars Dee Wallace. And in the doco, we it manages to capture the ordeal that it took to actually get her out from the United States. But what I found it
didn't cover, and what I'm intrigued about, is how you were able to ensnare her in the first place to get her involved. Can you tell us a bit about that kind of...
Sure. I mean, as you know, I collect VHS tapes. I love old movies. Not old movies, movies from 30 years ago, and there's a lot out there. And big fan of horror, so know that there is a lot of women in their 60s and 50s and 70s that were in horror films from the 70s and 80s that were famous and popular. And I follow a lot of horror fans on Instagram and blogs and stuff, and there is a passion for meeting these people, seeing these people at conventions and so on.
Yeah.
So they still have an audience. But all those women, they only ever get offered small, dodgy, just above cameo roles, or most of the time cameo roles in horror stuff. And they're hungry. They're very hungry. Yeah. Like my script, I worked hard to make sure that the lead woman, who is Dee, a mid-60s woman, had a great journey and was the hero and had to fight hard against a villain.
Yep.
And so I was able to get it to a lot of performers from that period before I even got it to Dee.
Yeah.
Purely on just buying an IMDb Pro account, finding their management, and sending it to them. So I was talking to Cassandra Peterson, who plays Elvira.
Yeah.
And she was interested in doing it just as herself and not as Elvira.
Yeah, sure.
But she was way too fancy and expensive. Cassandra, and then I was also talking to Sean Young, and I was talking to... I was able to get it to Olivia Hussey.
Oh, yeah.
Who, from Black Christmas, which is one of my inspirations, and I really wanted her. But, they all got the script, and they all read it, and their managers got back to me with either notes, or Sean Young was contacting me personally by email, which was super weird.
Wow.
In the end, I was looking at going after PJ Souls and other types.
Yes.
But then someone, an academic, because I was starting to go, I'm not sure who to get, and an academic in Melbourne said, why don't you talk to Lee Gambin, another writer, film buff, and he's writing a book on Cujo, and he's in contact with Dee.
Yeah.
He can get her the script, and she's coming out for Monster Fest. And that's pretty much how it happened. I got her the script, she liked it, and had a chat, talked to her manager, worked out a fee that I could afford at that time, and that was
before you reviewed the budget and
but in the end of the day, it's that those women of that age are looking for good roles, and I learned that at the American film market too. Attracting actors via scripts is the big thing. Write a script that's good for an actor.
Yep.
To then also have something that you can market because a famous person's in it.
Yeah, absolutely. I not long ago interviewed Linnea Quigley from Return of the Living Dead, and she was awesome. Loved chatting with her. She was so down to earth and really, really, really cool. So
I met her at the Portland Underground Film Festival. She was off the wall nuts. Not on drugs or just nuts and just awesome and fun. Crazy.
Great energy to her. Great energy. So I get where you're coming from with that. So the other thing that stood out was obviously the subject matter that you choose, and that obviously being a strong one with abortion being the central theme. My question is were you aware of how incredibly thin that wire was to tread in doing that kind of a film on that subject matter, and how did that affect the way you would go about capturing that kind of information and selling it as a horror?
The first draft was very blatant, and it was almost like It's Alive meets, I don't know, any other ridiculous Thanksgiving turkey day. Where it was purely an underdog puppet, almost, fetus, taking revenge on a family.
Mm-hmm.
And then after a while, I'm not sure about that. And it was sort of base and a bit dumb, as well as not necessarily aligning with what I believe in. So I was like, I'll try again to write a new draft.
Yeah.
And started reading a lot of books about abortion, watched tons of films about abortion. I became fascinated with a film by, what's his name? The guy who made American History X, Tony Kaye.
Yeah.
And it's called Lake of Fire. It's 2.5 hours, black and white. Fantastic documentary that looks at every side and just keeps saying, even this side makes this valid point. And you go, fuck, yeah, that is hard. It's so hard. It's such a thing to discuss. It's great. So then I tried to make all the characters have a different opinion that didn't necessarily make it easy to say what side is this film on. But at the end of the day, if you personify a fetus and say it's a human, you're making like a pro-life statement.
Yeah.
And that's what the anti-choice people do. So I was like, oh yeah, I'm doing that. So I've got to work hard to make Dee's character really hate this and feel like her choice has been taken away by the people that did it to her, and want to kill the thing that is destroying her family because it's alive. It's interesting. In America is where it really hits home. In Australia, not much. I'm waiting to see press from other countries. England's a little bit, but yeah, definitely America. That is the opening question of every podcast, every article wants to talk about, right, what's going on here? What is this? And it sort of shows it's like a funhouse mirror, really, because people will have an opinion based on their opinions as to what this film is. But it's coming out on Netflix next month.
Oh, okay.
In the US, and I'm just
that'd be interesting.
I'm wondering if I need to be on Twitter for that month. I just need to shut it down for a few months.
Yeah, you might
wait for it to be over. Yeah,
it is really, really interesting, but then like that's the thing, and I guess maybe why people are talking about it, but I can talk from my point of view, is that any decent horror needs to ask those kind of questions, or face up to that, and so that's where I think your film stands out, because you are not shying away from talking about that topic.
I think horror should deal with taboos.
Absolutely.
But what most people think horror taboos are just hurting women, stabbing flesh. Like, that's not a taboo. That happens everywhere all the time. It's not such a big thing. And so many horror festivals I went to just keep celebrating this really dumb idea that a taboo thing means, a man felt a bit angsty and stabbed something. No, that's what everything is. Taboo is incest. Taboo is pedophilia. Taboo is abortion, stuff that we aren't allowed to apparently make movies about. So,
or even talk about. That's the thing. Like, it's not just about making a movie; it's talking about it. Full stop.
Euthanasia, or rights of the disabled, stuff like that. Where it's like, okay, well, horror doesn't really deal with the taboo; it just deals with the acceptable taboos.
Yes.
And I thought I'd have a go at it, and I do see a lot of reviews that get angry at that.
Yeah, right.
And also reviews that get angry and want me to pick a side, that are frustrated that it's not clearly one or the other. Yeah.
But that's the point of doing a good movie, is that you don't pick a side. Anyway, I find that crazy. I'm sorry, I am kind of steering another question towards Craig, but it's more because...
Be my guest.
It's more because obviously you've got another strong character in Red Christmas, with the character who happens to have Down syndrome. His role and the strength is really integral to the dilemma that the family face. So I just wanted you to maybe comment on that as a choice, because obviously it's the reason I'm saying it's integral is polar opposite of what's happening to this creature or entity that's now kind of hunting them down. So,
sure, Jared and Gary followed this journey, but the impetus for me to put Jared in it, I always wanted Jared just to be in the movie as a performer, because I think he's great. And
he's awesome. Yeah. I do remember him from a Trot Fest thing a few years ago. Actually.
Yes, Be My Brother, where he won Best Actor.
Yeah, great. He's great. Awesome, yeah.
And I've worked with him before that point, so I knew him on that short film and helped them make it and stuff. And I just think he's an excellent actor who deserves to be in movies. And so I'd written him into this movie and never wanted to explore that issue. Yeah. Other than I started to look into eugenic arguments about abortion and went, that is so interesting. Bugger, I've got this guy who's perfect to deal with that dilemma. And I was making a documentary about disability and laughter, and spoke to some parents of people with Down syndrome. By the way, how would you go if you had another kid? And they went, nah, we would never do it again. And I thought, that's so hardcore. That's such a hard, which people who are all lefty and kind of think, open-minded wouldn't like that answer. But from experience, most people are like, I don't want that. Yeah. So I wrote Jared in. I kind of felt bad because I had to make his character deal with Down syndrome. Yeah. And then, Gary, you documented that whole process of how he didn't want to have to talk about having Down syndrome.
I mean, but that even in itself was interesting too, because you've got somebody that has, Down syndrome, and it's, it's something that they have to face day in, day out, and, and it's a challenge in itself. But, I mean, did he go at it looking at it from a character point of view, or was he really kind of stuck in that kind of moment, I guess, of identifying with himself? And
he's an interesting character. He's very close to his characters that he does play. Okay. But he's able to turn up the emotion 200%. Yeah. And create something. And I'm also very used to him. So it's like using my dad or using my brother or someone.
Yeah.
I know what he's like, so I was just able to work with him. Gary, you saw it from an outside point of view. Do you think he was able to...
Yeah, I think he was doing what a lot of great actors do, which was putting himself into the part.
Yeah.
And to the point where I think he, because his character obviously had a dislike for the bad guy, who was played by another actor, Craig's friend called Sam, during, I guess not shooting, but while we're on set, he had a natural dislike for Sam a little bit. There's quite a bit of tension between them. And I think it's just because he really focuses on that.
Yeah.
And obviously, if you see the documentary, he does use a personal emotion to get a great performance.
Yeah.
Through Craig directing him as well. But I think that's really I mean, it's what all great actors do, and
I agree.
Certainly was doing it as well.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it stood out from the documentary. And part of that process was one of the most amazing things that was captured in your film, and that journey that he was going through to get to what you needed for your final take. It was a fascinating journey from that respect. So if we shift gear a second, I'm going to bring you properly back into the conversation, Gary. But as directors, who have been your biggest influences?
Well, I guess I'm coming from a documentary perspective.
Absolutely.
So I think very early on, Michael Moore, but this was before back when he did a film called Roger and Me.
Yeah.
But I sort of moved on from him, and I was very much a Nick Broomfield guy.
Yeah.
Well, I really liked his stuff, particularly his early stuff.
Yeah.
Those sort of influences where the camera rolls a lot.
Yes.
I mean, I guess, Louis Theroux still does that sort of style of film as well, although I feel like some of his earlier stuff was better as well.
Yeah.
But, those sort of observational filmmakers, they go on a journey, and you don't necessarily know, or they maybe don't necessarily know where it's all going. But, they're obviously good enough filmmakers to be able to, create a great film no matter what happens. So, those sort of guys, I think.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah. Great Gardens stands out for me as a really, really great documentary, which is following the mother and the daughter kind of. Have you seen it?
No, it's a fantastic film. I was thinking about that the other day, thinking, could you get that film funded today?
Yeah.
I mean, if you went and pitched that to a television network, they'd laugh at you.
Yeah.
Sadly,
it's true.
Sadly, because it's I guess it's all a lot of it's now focused on Al Gore, the planet or political things or I mean, which are obviously important subjects, but I think a lot of these older cinema verite films are being lost in I guess this sort of new demand for stories that actually try to change the world, or films that try to change the world.
Yeah. It needs to evoke something, doesn't it, rather than capture or a slice of life, which is...
it feels that way, particularly in Australia, I think. There's always, where television's sort of driving a lot of the funding, there always seems to be, it has to be a reason for it. I mean, not just as a piece of entertainment, which I think maybe my films sort of sit more under.
Side. Yeah.
I mean, I like to compare them to, I guess, comedy or something like that.
Sure.
It's like, well, why have a comedy program?
Yep.
Because people like them and enjoy them. Why not have a documentary that's funny, takes you on a journey, shows you a different side of things.
Yeah. Agreed. So Craig, biggest influences, obviously there's maybe quite a few.
I mean, the first half of the movie I tried to be like Nancy Myers or Nora Ephron, like real polite family, romantic holiday stuff, and the second half is just all kind of nuts. I mean, I remember I just watched Conjuring 2 and went, that's right, I like what James Wan did in Conjuring where it feels stable, but then whenever there's a presence in the room, there's an instability of the camera. It's not off sticks and off the Steadicam. I thought that was super cool. But the lighting is a big thing that everyone points out is very giallo, very Suspiria, and on set we would call that. We'd have 3 lighting states. It was either the Nancy Myers daytime, the nighttime where the lights have gone bad, or it's Suspiria. You just call it Suspiria lighting. But the reason for that was when I was a boy, I loved a cartoon about Pluto's Christmas tree, where Mickey cuts down a tree, drags it inside, but there's 2 chipmunks inside the tree. But they dress it with lights and everything. And then most of the cartoon, it's like from the mid-50s, it's the little chipmunks running onto a different branch, and every branch is a different colour light bulb. Yeah. So the idea for all of the lights was that it was like being in a giant Christmas tree. Yeah. And it just so happened that Suspiria was the easiest way to reference that.
yeah, for sure.
But yeah, we made each room a different colour, like in that cartoon.
Yeah. I didn't realise that until you just said it, but I completely get what you're saying with that now. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, you seem to have quite a vast knowledge of film, and like you've got a huge collection just here in the warehouse where we're doing the record. But did you have any expectations that, or did you have any expectations that may have surprised you in the filmmaking process that you weren't expecting?
Well, Gary's documentary captures the first day of filming where I had underplanned for people to be there and the support I needed. But I feel like the rest of it went smoothly. And I don't have anything like just marketing, just being a producer.
Yeah.
The role of the producer became far more important than the role of the filmmaker. And that was the thing that altered my mind in making this whole film, is that it doesn't matter about the film. The video file isn't what's important.
Yeah.
You can make a 90-minute video file of whatever you like. But if you want it to be seen by the world, that is no longer the director's job. The director can be a bit smart about what they choose to do, but it is the producer's job to make thousands or millions of people see it, or get the money back that the movie cost. And that is the hardest thing that I had no idea how I was not ready for that. And I think that is that filmmaker thing. If we get told to go and see this movie because it's got a lot of steam around it, because it did really well at Sundance. But what you find out is that, no, that was sold months ago, and that was a press release designed to come out that night at Sundance.
Right,
company saying they bought it. And then, surprise, surprise, it's in cinemas in your country 2 weeks later, and there's posters already up for it. Like, that is all marketed, and you're being lied to, because the main people who watch independent cinema are usually filmmakers who want to make independent cinema. And it's in everyone's best interest to keep spreading that false idea that a film can be so brilliant that it's just, it gets rewarded with cinema releases and everyone sees it. Whereas that is just pure marketing by people who are smarter than chumps like I was.
Okay. So, Gary, I'm doing a similar kind of question towards you, but as a documentarian, you have to be ready for the unexpected to happen, because it could take you in any direction. So, with Red Christmas, and Craig appeared to have quite an ample amount of material to work with during the filming process. But what surprised you the most? What kind of took you off guard? Despite, as I said, being a documentarian and being on your toes, was there something that came along that you went, "Whoa, I really wasn't expecting that to come about"?
When you sort of start watching a very low budget film come together, you know, regardless of what film it is, that it's got many challenges ahead of it. So I wasn't surprised so much in that. So maybe I was surprised that it happened on the first day, that things sort of collapsed a little bit on Craig, which was maybe a good thing for him, in that he was able to
shift gears that quickly as well, to reassess stuff.
And rebuild to get through the rest of the shoot. So maybe I'm a little bit surprised about that, but I think it was just, I was not expecting it to be so hard for the film to get out there. I knew it was hard, but I sort of felt like it. It did lots of festivals, but I think it was maybe So let me rephrase it. Not get out there, but actually get picked up and sold. Yeah. And I think that in the end, it's done amazingly well. But it sort of shocked me that it's actually that hard to get someone to pick up a film like this, and sell it. And in the end, they did, and it's done great. But it took a while. Yeah. And I could feel Craig's frustration, and certainly, I look at it now and think, well, I've got a documentary that's not a horror film that horror. It seems to be sort of swimming around in the horror community a little bit, which is great that they're embracing it, because I guess I never saw the horror market as the audience for this film. I saw it in a much broader way, but I look at it and just think, it's so hard, and you feel for all of the filmmakers that have made great pieces of work, and you see them around, and they just don't get traction, or worse still, they get picked up and they never make any money. There's no money that ever comes back to the filmmaker. So that's probably the biggest eye-opening thing for me, and maybe because I'm sort of looking at it now with my film as well.
Sure. So if anything with your film, it's a great example of what it takes to physically and mentally make an independent film, and I think that's why people are getting a lot of it. It's getting a lot of attention, because it perfectly captures that. But what advice would the both of you give to would-be filmmakers out there that may want to go down that line of trying to make something and getting it out there?
I would say marketability is the most important thing. Yeah. You must have a marketable element if you want anyone to see it. Yeah. And what I've learned now is that marketable elements are things you can get before you make your movie. So if you're going to make your movie, like getting the money of my brother, what I learned, a term in America is called dumb money. Money that comes into a project that doesn't understand the nature of the industry, and therefore is just dumb. Yeah. And I felt horrible that I made my brother make it into dumb money. It's like a sad thing to think that I've turned him dumb because I took his money. So I think money that's invested into films because someone somewhere knows that film can sell is smart. And if you are trying to get a film up and you think it's going to be the best thing ever, why not get that money? Because at least you're finding out what the marketable elements are. And that no matter what, your film will not be that good that people need to put it out with no stars, with no great hook, with no great writing. Like, it needs all those things to be a real thing in the world. It needs to be able to have a reason for someone to market it to get the audience to see it. And unless, like all those scams you hear about, not Kickstarter, but the ones where you can put it online yourself and people will come to it, that's great if you are making a film that's already got an audience. If people who buy your type of body armour want to see your ex-soldiers be in a zombie film, and you've got a mailing list of 3 million people, brilliant idea. Put it up there and sell it yourself. But if you've just made a work of art that's not with an instant audience, you've got to be thinking about what is marketable about it.
Sure. Yeah, I understand that. Is there anything you want to add to that, Gary, at all?
Well, I would agree. I think from my perspective, it's my biggest hurdle is actually trying to tell people that it's not just the making of a horror film. It's a journey. It's something that I think a lot of people would relate to, and you don't have to be a horror fan or a filmmaker to appreciate it. And maybe that's my biggest challenge, is trying to get the word out about that, because a lot of people, I think, make an assumption of what the film is.
Sure.
And it's great when you take an audience by surprise. They're actually excited by the idea that it wasn't what they thought it was. But you've got to get them into the cinema first. And so that's been my challenge. Maybe calling film horror movie a low budget nightmare hasn't helped so much. I mean, it has in some ways, but maybe not in other ways. You really do need to think about the audience in the end. Like, who's going to watch this film? And how am I going to sell it to people? I think that's all smart filmmakers should be thinking that. Even directors who don't have to, at the end of the day, sell their films. Certainly, they need to be thinking, how is somebody else going to sell this?
Yeah, yeah.
Can I just add?
Yeah, go on, please.
One great piece of advice I heard was study the failures. Because the only data you ever get are, look at what Blair Witch did.
Yeah.
Look at what Paranormal Activity did. But they are very much out of the blue success stories. You look at the 99% of films that disappear and no one saw. You study those. And what I did with this horror, going to many festivals around the world in the last year, you see all those failures.
Yeah.
Films that I think completely fine and totally watchable and I enjoyed them will never be seen by anyone. And they're the failures that because they don't get out into the world.
Yeah.
So stop looking at the data of really good films that became massive hits and look at the massive majority of other films that you've never heard of.
Yeah.
Just pick one. Just IMDb someone who's made a feature or, and follow that story.
Yeah, that's really good. That's a really good point. Thank you, Craig. So, was there anything that would you, after you've gone through all this kind of, I want to say ordeal, to kind of get both of your films made, would you do it again? Would you change anything at all? I mean, obviously you were talking about marketing, but is there anything else you would go about differently?
Well, I sound like an ad for Mad Men or something. But, I would always be looking to marketable elements. I would get it funded first.
Yep.
Not rely on my own money or dumb money because it's not educated money. It needs to have people understand what this thing is and it's worth money to make it in the first place.
Yeah.
There's a horrible tension of, and Gary has documented this, of my life in that I still owe people money and I feel like I'm indebted to them. And I do everything I can for every actor, every crew member that came out. I try and get them work. I'll cut their show reels. I'll rip things off VHS or anything they need. I am like a slave to the people I owe money to.
Yeah.
And that is not a great feeling.
No.
Yeah.
No, because it's hanging over your head.
Yeah, so I would always be... Yeah. I just won't do it again unless I have the money first.
Yeah,
so that's
sure.
what I would do different.
Yeah. How about you?
I think... I didn't get my film funded until about a third of the way through. But so in a way... It's a slightly different story in that I'm lucky that I don't owe anybody money. But, I think next time I'll be looking for other streams to fund film. I'm hoping that the VOD market is going to take off. I mean, it certainly is internationally, but whether it happens in Australia and we can actually go to Netflix or Stan and actually get money for a documentary, not just a high-end drama series. So I'm hoping that might change soon, because otherwise I think we really, particularly from a documentary perspective, very narrow in the sort of films we can make. So one of the things I'm sort of exploring as I get my film out there, and as I said, I'm like a year behind Craig, is what other avenues are out there to get films funded. And I'm hoping that might be a new model for filmmakers, particularly documentary filmmakers that don't necessarily want to make television style stories or themes, which tend to skew a little bit older, I think.
Agreed.
So that's really where I'm at. I mean, do it differently. I mean, I guess I'm sort of that's if we can all find another way to fund these films, I think it'll be a great start.
Yeah, for sure. So, just following on from that kind of with tone as well, was there anything that you left out the final cut, and if so, why?
Me, I'm lucky. I was so cheap that I could only shoot what I had written.
Okay.
And there was 2 moments that I cut out where it was just like, I was developing a relationship between the father, the uncle and the daughter that I thought, that's a bit of fun, like if it's a bit perverse, but they just seemed a bit not right, and I took them out in the first cut. It was only like 3 lines, 2 scenes, and I went, they can come out, and no one ever missed them. I thought if cast or crew ever said, hey, whatever, but no one ever remembered, which made me go, that was the right thing to do. But not cut out, but things I wish I'd put in.
Sure.
I often look at and go, oh, that would be so easy to fix.
Yeah.
But I kind of like the idea, and when I watch VHS, I'm reminded of dodgy films that you go, yeah, it would be very easy to fix a lot of this movie, but you've got to draw a line and stop at some point and just suck it up and let it be, and not a perfect artwork. I kind of like.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, sometimes when it's a bad screening, I've only really had one screening where I felt really bad while watching, and I just looked at the screen and saw so many solutions that would have taken half a day to pick up, and I was like, why didn't I let this go into the world like this? Anyway, that's regret. That's not cutting out stuff.
No. How about you, Gary? Is there anything that...
Well, one of my challenges was that I had almost 2 years of story to squeeze into. My goal was under 100 minutes, and I knew that was pretty much the limit. Any time after that, people would start to feel like it was dragging, and I knew this from doing a few test screenings. So there was a lot of stuff, a lot of really funny stuff that if I just showed you the clip, you'd go, well, that was fantastic. Why didn't you put it in? But I was sort of like an aeroplane trying to get over a mountain, and I just had to throw scenes overboard in order to get there.
Yeah.
But there's one in particular. I think that it's a scene where Craig's just learnt that his parents couldn't get the loan for $20,000. So he's $20,000 down, and he goes axe throwing with his friend Hugh. And
it's a proper thing. I didn't go mental.
You can actually go axe throwing.
Yeah, wow.
Look it up.
Who knew?
Yeah, you can't drink alcohol, which is probably sensible.
Yes.
But yeah, his friend Hugh was the manager of the place, so we sort of turned up one night and had free reign. And so yeah, Craig was letting off a bit of steam, throwing axes, mostly missing the board, which is funny in itself. But also it's an extension to this the circumcision story, which I know a lot of people say, why the hell is that in there? But yeah, it was a moment where Craig didn't have enough money to go back to the doctors for his checkup, which really summed up the situation he was in. And I struggled a lot because I felt like that scene needed to be in there, but it just didn't have a place. Really, because you need to think about the tone of where the scene takes you. What is that we're sort of heading down thematically at that point. Craig sort of struggled to where the hell am I going to get money, and it was a little bit too funny, and it just didn't work. So that came out, but also maybe it's a good opportunity to explain why I included the story about Craig getting circumcision, because it's people just think, that's cheap humour, but to me, it wasn't cheap. To me, it was. I was not interested in covering that aspect at all until Craig said to me one time, it's weird, but I actually do feel like I'm becoming a man. I'm finally growing up, and as soon as he said that, all of a sudden, the sort of spiritual, circumcision, becoming a man fit for me, and so it stayed in there, and for me, I think it actually does have a place in the documentary. But I don't know, maybe some people are so shocked they're not listening to what Craig's saying as he's walking in to the surgery, but anyway, and the axe throwing story sort of fitted into that as well.
Yeah, for sure. Were there times when you were making either of your projects and you said, I just want to quit?
Yeah.
So
I don't know if I ever. I don't know. Did I quit? Did you ever capture me feeling like I always wanted to quit? Yeah, like the bit when I'm on the lounge, I feel. But for me, that was like months of like, oh, I'm fucked.
Yeah,
I don't know what I'm doing,
Yeah.
and why have I done this, and nothing good will ever come of this. Yeah, I mean, not even quit. It's just like die.
Yeah. Just end
That's
it.
more appropriate.
Yeah.
Gary?
Yeah, well, I think maybe the first day of your shoot was.
What, you wanted to quit?
Yeah, I found you may not realise this, but I found it really hard to film all that stuff with you.
From a personal point of
Yeah,
view.
from a personal thing, because I actually thought, because I consider Craig a good friend now. I actually thought that maybe. Where's she?
Oh,
man.
Oh, man.
That we might not be friends after. But yeah, I think on the first day I thought that this was hard because you need to sort of, it's a weird balancing act for documentary filmmakers because you need to be with your subject. You need to in some ways have them feel comfortable with you being there. I sort of, in a way, I probably didn't do as good a job as I should have.
In that particular moment.
Yeah, because I was sort of standing back going, this is horrible.
Yeah.
I can't believe this is happening. And I felt really bad just being there, having the camera, trying to capture it.
Because I don't know if it comes across in the documentary, but there were just things where you had a second camera operator that day, just a young man that I'd worked with.
Yeah.
On another small project. And he was really excited about my horror film, and then super excited that Gary had a job for him on it.
Yeah.
But, like, he knew how to solve some of the shit. Like, he could have just picked up a monitor and ran a cable in and plugged it into my DP.
Sure.
And helped out. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I could tell that he was also like, I'm not allowed.
Yeah.
And I wonder if there was that element too, Gary, that it's like, fuck, we needed all hands on deck.
Well, I guess there was, but I didn't feel so bad about that because I made it clear that I was hiring this guy for my film. And, I had two, basically the whole shoot, there was him and myself.
Yeah.
And before that it was just me. So I directing, producing, sound and camera.
Sure, yeah.
I really felt I needed the second guy. I didn't feel so guilty about it as maybe Craig did. Craig was sort of angry because that was his mistake, and I would have hired somebody else. I actually think I remember us having a conversation about do you need him? Are you sure? So I didn't feel bad about that. It was more just like, I don't know. I just remember feeling a bit bad about that.
But did you feel like you could have helped out? I didn't think that. I wasn't thinking, why isn't Gary and Cody helping out here? Because I was just going, I'm just fucked. I couldn't think about anything else.
Yeah, there's a bit, it's actually in the television version, not the feature version.
Yep.
But the day before the shoot, where I actually question you, where it feels like a bit quiet.
Yeah.
So, I guess I asked a few questions, but in a way, it's my job not to try and solve Craig's problems.
No.
But at the same time, I don't want to see him crash and burn. So that's where I think maybe the conflict came for me, because it's, on one hand, I should have been going, this is great for my documentary. But on the other hand, I'm going, he's my friend.
Yeah.
Who's, I very much sort of shared his dream in a way. This is you may not see it, but the documentary is actually very personal for me too, because I saw my film as being, in a way, my last chance to sort of break out of where I was at.
Sure.
To try and make a film that I get out there internationally and hopefully move on. So I really shared Craig's journey in a way, and certainly pain.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how many similarities there are between him making his film and making my film.
Yeah.
You don't see them, just in the way.
Needed a documentary of your documentary to capture that.
When he was trying to find money, I was trying to find money too.
Sure.
And I actually had to go through the whole of the Red Christmas shoot without any funding.
Yeah.
So it was,
You had the mortgage, didn't you?
We
Take
very
some money
much,
out of
I pulled some money out of our home loan to do it. Not a huge amount, like enough that I,
Keep you.
you know, wouldn't have been happy, but wouldn't have lost the house. It was only like $20 grand. Basically,
Yeah.
To get by and to actually buy proper mic and things like
Sure.
that. But I guess probably that was. I lost the question, but that was
right.
tough.
We were talking about the moments of quitting. That's where.
Yeah. No, well, yeah. I think maybe that was the point.
Yeah,
where
sure.
I felt this is gonna be hard.
Yeah. So
I would not have stopped being friends with you. I thought it was going to be hard. On that day, I remember.
He might not have liked you, but you.
No, I would have just been like, this hurts too much to have someone to have to film me at the same time. So I kind of feel like I'm on top of it at times, but that was the day where it was like, this is going to suck.
It was horrible, and I had to interview you at the end, and I knew you weren't happy about it, but because I asked some pretty obvious questions, which were they needed to be asked, I guess, to hear from you why things didn't work out.
Yeah.
But I guess that's when you make these sort of films. They're the sort of things you come up against, and in some ways it really benefits the documentary. Craig and I being friends and knowing each other so well. But on the other hand, that's the downside in that, I'm invested and, I also I'd never made this film to watch Craig fail.
No, of course. Yeah.
So, I'm hoping, like the audience, I think, in the documentary, that it's a success.
Yeah,
and,
sure.
Yeah.
So kind of looking at those moments, what was it then that made you push yourself on to complete it? What was that drive that made you go, no, do you know what? Fuck that. This stuff's going wrong, but I can do this. What was that? Was there something inside you?
Yeah. I mean, and Gary got it on film with me. I watched the movie with Jared. He came around and he just watched it, and I was just watching it like a generic horror movie that I hadn't made because I hadn't watched it because I hated everything about it. And I just watched it, and he was getting into it, and I was getting into it, and I went, this isn't okay. This is a film I could tell people about.
That's I remember the scene now,
wacky enough and stupid enough and dealing with subject matter that you're not supposed to. I would want people to see this. And that's where I went, right, well, idiot, that's your film. Go as hard as you can to work that out.
Sure.
Yeah.
And Jared very cleverly reminded you of Saw. And, maybe subconsciously you went, gee, that did all right.
Yeah. That's funny. What about you, Gary? I mean, like, obviously.
Well, I think apart from moments of awkwardness, filming Craig, in down moments, I always felt that I was filming good footage, and there was a good story in there. I guess from the first time I made a documentary, I sort of trusted my instinct.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's pretty good. I know when we've got a good scene when we filmed it.
Yeah.
And so, I knew we'd filmed a lot of those.
Sure.
And certainly Craig was very likable. His dad was very likable.
Yeah.
Jared was very likable. Inside I knew that there was a film there. The challenge is putting it all together and how you tell the story in under 100 minutes. But I think probably that's what drove me. Probably from the first one of the first scenes, or probably the first scene that's in the documentary that I shot, was a location recce.
Oh yeah.
And that filming that, I knew that was great.
Yeah.
I knew we had something good there.
Sure. With my dad,
No.
You.
You.
The late night one.
The covert one.
Yeah, good moment. So speaking of your dad, Craig, is he still pursuing his acting interests? And
He's calmed down now because he maybe 6 months ago he got an agent, and I had to cut a show reel, and then I had to shoot scenes with him.
Right.
It's not great. It's dreadful. He's not an actor. And I said, if you want to be an actor, Dad, you need to go to acting school.
Yeah.
I mean, you're 70. You know, it might be a bit late, but I feel sorry for Dad because he's me, but in a different generation.
Sure.
So for him, at 14, he got a job in a hardware store.
Yep.
His dad had gone. He just lived with his mum, and that was it. You know, that's what he had to do. And I think if he had the choice and grew up like I did, exactly the same person. Same person.
Yeah.
But so I do feel like, you know, got to give it a go. But now he's at home. He's got the time. If he wants to go to acting school, he should take it seriously instead of just keep trying to weasel his way in. Like, you have to respect that other people, you know, can't just weasel in that easily.
Sure.
And you need to study. I mean, I sound like I'm being harsh, but I do a lot of work for him, helping him with his nut job idea that he's an actor. And I think Gary's documentary hasn't helped that either, because everyone sees me and goes, "Oh, good on you, Rob. You're the best. Yeah, you did acting." So you know, he's doing all right. He's doing all right.
Both Red Christmas and Horror Movie obviously are out in the big wide world now as we speak, as we're recording this. And I will mention again that you can catch a double screening at Event Cinemas Georgetown in Sydney at 7 p.m. if I get my act together and get this out in time. On the 1st of December. Did I say that? 1st of December. But what has been the initial reaction to both your films so far? What have you seen out there and their responses?
Well, my film went first out there. It did alright. It got mixed reviews everywhere. I couldn't read the reviews. It was too scary. So I had someone read them for me and just show me all the good ones. But there were plenty of good ones, and that got me excited. Yeah. A lot of great pull quotes. I worked out that I needed to get a sales agent. Did that. Got distributors in different countries. And now it's interesting. I've got a different life again on the DVD circuit. That's why people think my film's coming out at the same time as Gary's, I think, because it's coming out on DVD everywhere at the same in these months, and so there are tons of what they do, I guess, is they send websites the DVD, and then someone gets a free copy and reviews it in return. So that's happening a lot. So a lot more reviews are coming out currently. How's it been received? Not as well, because I look at a film like Get Out and I go, oh, that's a great film that dealt with social issues and was a horror movie that everyone got behind. Mine, I think, also fails at doing that exactly the same way. Yep. But also, that had a very marketable elements. It was made by a very famous American comedian and had a lot of, like, the Weinstein Company behind it. Blumhouse behind it. Yeah. So that makes sense that has done what it has done. Yep. And I go, so that's one of the bigger things that I've missed out on doing, is getting my film out there the right way. To do what I'm doing. If I want it, it will be always considered a weird horror film by horror fans who do discover it, because it's not being pushed in the same way that a big film like that might be pushed. Yeah. And that's fine. I've just learnt that lesson. So that's how it's getting out there. How it's being received.
And Gary, yours, as you said, is only just at that point.
Yeah, well, it's only, I guess it's just done its first international screening at Fright Fest in the UK, and obviously the TV version here in Australia. So it's still hopefully got a way to go. A few other festivals are looking at it. It's into a few more, so we'll see what happens. But I guess, unless people are not showing me the bad ones, I've been looking for the bad ones. It seems to be being received pretty well.
Oh, cool.
Like all the reviews I've read, except for one who wanted to know why I didn't ask about the abortion, why Craig chose abortion in the film.
Sure.
It's been very positive about the...
It's not even about you, is it? Oh, I think they're frustrated.
Well, it's obviously that's what
they could always ring
it's
me,
obviously what they expected, a question they had in their head.
Yeah.
But I guess that's clearly a horror person reviewing a film, a documentary, and I always said that this is not necessarily certainly not a horror film, and we in a way play down a lot of the horror element, the making of horror elements, because for me it's a much bigger story than that. I think it's doing okay. Yeah, it's doing okay. I mean, if I had Terry Gilliam and Johnny Depp in it. You know, maybe I'll be a step further at the moment. No offense, Craig. But
pass that on to D. Wallace.
Sorry, I do have D. Wallace. So overall, I'm really happy with the response so far. People are really getting the story, and you know, the humour's working, the drama's working, the emotion's working. So you know, that's all I can really ask for.
Yeah.
And the weird things happen off the back of Gary's is people re-evaluate my film.
Yes.
I've had reviewers review both our films, and come back to me and say, "Oh, I really like it now," which is weird because one thing I learnt from Dee actually was I just have a random VHS here with her face painted on the cover from the late 80s, and I showed it to her when she was in Australia, and I said, "Hey, look at this tape of you," and she goes, "Oh, I remember that film." And I'd seen this film previously, and I thought it was, you know, maybe 4 or 5 out of 10. You know, it's not great.
Sure.
And a bit weird, and some weird choices. She goes, "Yeah, the woman who directed that was going through a horrible divorce and had just been diagnosed with MS. And she was sick a lot of the days we made that film."
Oh my god!
And I thought, well, fuck. Now, if I knew that, but no one, you don't put that on the back cover on the poster. Directed by a divorce-riddled, MS-riddled woman. Then and it's the same with Gary's film. Like when you know the story behind a film, but most films exist in a vacuum. They are just a work of art.
Yeah.
Just like a gallery, you've just got to let the audience walk by it, and if they like it, they like it.
Yeah.
You can't. You know, and that's what I have to tell a lot of when I work in TV with a lot of younger people. You can't hand out your excuse card. You can't have people download an A4 page saying why it's shit. They will just watch it and think it's shit.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
But here I am though with an excuse card. So following my film a year later.
Sure.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you were talking about how the DVD stuff is starting to pick up for Red Christmas now, and it's interesting that that's almost kind of a similar thing to the films that we've grown up with in the 80s when we were talking off record earlier, and how the VHS kind of rental kind of stuff picked up. And we're kind of living in a post world of that where it's not really a thing now, is it? But it's interesting that you're saying that you're noticing that your film's picking up in that area.
Well, I mean, it's just made some sales onto DVD. Which is weird. Like DVDs come out in Germany, UK, Canada, Australia, US, New Zealand, and all German language speaking places.
Sure.
Home entertainment sales like Taiwan, Korea, Turkey, South America, they're just being put on straight onto the internet. And what I've heard from most distributors is they'll buy it and they'll call it the DVD rate.
Yeah.
Because of the olden days, but what they're actually going to make their money on are video on demand sales.
Sure.
But they just buy the blanket license from you and call it whatever you want. But one of the big things I learned was that the information I had from 7 years ago said that I could make at least $250,000 up front from this film by just being what it is.
Yeah.
And that is completely not true, but I had it confirmed by all the sales agents in on stage at the film market where they go, yeah, that did happen in that time.
Wow.
But now, because DVD has dropped off so much,
it
is impossible to get that kind of advance on a low-budget horror film.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think I know a lot of people that will walk into a store and they'll buy a DVD just purely on a whim, and that's probably where that kind of may come from. Whereas, like, the on-demand stuff is more, it is more about, you surf through it and you just happen to kind of like the front cover or something, which does go back to the old, VHS days when you walked into, like, Blockbuster or one of those places, and a lot of the time you go, oh, that looks fucking sick. I want to watch that.
And that's what I've learned here as well with VHS covers, different in each country.
Yeah.
And it's based on what the market wants. So in America, my poster, that is in Australia, it's just the hooded bad guy holding a present.
Yep.
In America, they put a skull in the face of the hooded bad guy.
Ah, okay.
In UK, they just focused on the present with little claws popping out, which is totally not. It looks like a critter film.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
And then in Germany, in Canada, they put the monster mask superimposed into the hood.
Oh, okay.
So you can see the final form that you see for like half a second.
Yeah.
As if you're going to see this monster hunting everyone throughout the film. So every country also has its own great little regional differences that they know sell movies, sell horror movies.
Yeah. It's interesting because you see a lot of stuff that trends online too. You sometimes see these film posters from like Poland or other countries where they've been, obviously the artist has been briefed into the film, not necessarily seen it, and they do these kind of crazy drawings. You're like, where did you get that stuff from? Yeah, it's really cool
stuff.
So okay, so we're just going to kind of get to the end of the podcast now, but what's next on the agenda for you guys? What's on the horizon? What are you looking at? Is it more kind of pushing your own, Red Christmas and horror movie, or is what's next? Is there something in the pipeline?
Well, I guess I'm just looking at a number of ideas. As I said before, I think if I can find some money and an avenue, maybe not necessarily in Australia but internationally, or through a VOD network or something like that. I guess that's what I'm sort of exploring at the moment. But a couple of ideas, but nothing worth talking about just yet.
Sure.
I work here a lot in comedy television, and I always have worked there doing something for Australian comedians or Australian, mostly ABC comedy. And then, in regards to horror, I've met some people, and I'll be finding out soon how well what I've met, the people I've met, is worth to actually giving me money.
Okay.
So, for instance, the US distributor has now made over 150,000 off my film, of which I've gotten 20,000, and that's all I'll ever get from it.
Right, yeah.
So I'd like to go back to them and go, hey, I'm going to make another one. Same branding, same type of film.
Yep.
Will you give me 100,000 advance, knowing that you can make at least 150?
Yeah.
And I guarantee I'll get a bigger star this time,
Yeah.
But they might just go, nah.
Yeah.
We don't need to do that, because that's not how we roll.
Yeah.
And every country that has bought it, I could approach all of them and try that same scam.
Sure.
And anyway, so my point is I'm writing horror pictures, 2-page pictures, before I bother writing the whole script, showing them and saying, do you think you can get me first?
Yeah, makes sense. With that though, the fact that you've now got Red Christmas out there, it's almost like that's I can do this. We've gone through all the traps. You can watch this too to kind of see that I can handle these kind of difficult situations and produce something. So that would hopefully help, leverage something maybe. Who knows?
Yeah, no, I will find out.
You'll find out. Cool.
I'll find out, but at least I know that's the first thing I've got to find out. And when that fails, start working on new things.
Sure.
Yeah. I have learnt the value of a good producer, though.
Yeah.
Like, someone better than me, someone who's made 10 horror films is who I should be getting on. Not a friend, or someone who's just going to help me out.
Yeah.
I need someone who's done it a lot of times, because they will guarantee money as well.
Sure.
A good producer.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's us for the Surgeons of Horror podcast. Once again, just thank you, Gary Doust and Craig Anderson, for joining me in discussing your films, and I wish you all the success down the line. Thanks very much, gents.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Cheers.
You're listening to the Surgeons of Horror podcast. Music supplied by Peter Nezik. For more discussions or podcasts, head over to surgeonsofhorror.com or head over to our Facebook and Twitter sites for the latest news and updates.